Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of our podcast, Is Breakfast Included? Thank you for stopping by. This week on the show, we're joined by Russell Graham, an insanely talented musician, producer, vocalist, and recording engineer. You probably know him from his work with Nile and Chic, but we chat about everything from his early gigs at the Apollo Theater to going viral with the Soul Glo theme at NPR's Tiny Desk. Russell also shares what it's like to keep up with the talented musicians around him and how music keeps him grounded on and off stage. You're not going to want to miss this one, so let's check it out.
Tell everyone who you are.
All right. I am Russell Graham. I am a musician, multi-instrumentalist, vocalist, recording engineer, producer, songwriter, and all of that currently wraps into working as part of the band Chic and as working for that band's leader, Nile Rodgers, in the capacity of recording engineer and sometimes multi-instrumentalist, vocal guinea pig, etc. in the studio.
Very well put.
Thanks. That's about as concise as we can make it. And of course, various other things led up to that, but that's the current day job.
Right on. And where are you from originally?
I grew up in New Rochelle, which is a suburb of New York City, just north of the Bronx. And so New York City was kind of the arts playground for my friends and myself growing up. If we were going to see a concert or a show or go to a museum, it was almost always in New York City.
Right on, man.
Yeah. And we were also fortunate. We were in a public school system that made a point of taking the students and providing access to some of those things. So we would have field trips to New York City art museums. We would have field trips to a Broadway show. We even went to, say, a rehearsal of the Metropolitan Opera, that kind of thing. And I don't know to what extent that was normal or different from other school districts. I don't know to what extent any of that still exists, because I'm aware that a lot of public school arts funding has been cut. So I feel very fortunate that was part of my own experience growing up.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of that where I grew up at all in Texas.
We did. In New Jersey, we did. But yeah, with the cutbacks, that's so sad that the creative outlet for kids is now really not what it was when we were growing up, unless,
in some ways, or people and organizations, I think, are rising up to pick up the slack. For example, my wife is also a performer. She's from the Buffalo area, Buffalo, New York. Mm-hmm. And probably the biggest recent thing musically to come out of Buffalo is still Goo Goo Dolls. And their bass player, Robbie, has been very, very active in doing fundraisers every year. He has an organization called Music is Art, and some of what they do, if I remember correctly, is being able to get instruments into schools, being able to have kids still have some of those experiences. But as far as I know, it's not as standardized as it was. And part of the shame in that is that it's not just a pastime or enjoyable time doing something different than the regular studies. It's also things like arts and music. They develop mental processes that then are useful in all other aspects of life, and in particular in science and mathematics. And in some ways, I think we're starting to see the impact of that, and maybe collectively across the country we'll realize that if what we're trying to do is improve school performance, then part of that is going to mean not cutting things like arts budgets. It seems as if, just based on some conversations we've had when we've been working in the UK, it seems as if the UK has realized that and is making an effort to make sure some of those experiences are still available.
Right on.
Do you come from a musical family? Were your parents?
Sort of. My dad did play piano to a certain extent, but wasn't really as avid about pursuing it once I got past a certain point. And my mom, when she was younger, played cello. And then when I was growing up, still played guitar to a certain extent. But also it didn't really remain part of her pursuits. So they had some degree of musical experience and background, but more so as you get just a little more extended into the family. So my dad's mom, my grandmother, was an accomplished pianist, and I guess you could say was semi-professional. When I was going through some old documents and items and such, I found a listing from her having played live on a radio show in New York City, that kind of thing. Her sister was a published songwriter for some of the stuff that she did. And let me think about what the relationship would be. So this would be my grandmother, same grandmother, her nephew, my dad's cousin, was a very, very gifted musician. So it's there in the family, not necessarily my parents, but it wasn't foreign. And the idea of somebody pursuing music wasn't foreign.
Yeah. What were some of your earliest influences? And like from the get-go, did you want to be in a band?
I didn't specifically want to be in a band. I knew I wanted to be a performer. That was what I wanted to do. And some of the earliest music that I enjoyed listening to most, in terms of what I can remember of, quote, adult music, was Elton John, Billy Joel, Beatles, and my mother was a huge Barry Manilow fan. So there was a lot of listening to Barry Manilow. So my awareness, a lot of my awareness of what it meant to be a professional in music was individuals like a Barry Manilow or an Elton John. So to a certain extent, it was kind of like, oh yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah.
But as I look back over my entire trajectory, I never really developed a specific artistic identity. For example, if you take an Elton John, he figured out what lane he wanted to try to be in and what he was going to do to be uniquely Elton John. If you take a Lady Gaga, same thing. If you go contemporary, if you look at a Chappell Roan, same thing. She has figured out how to be focused on, here's the identity I'm going to pursue. And some people have reinvented themselves. It doesn't mean that they stay that creature, but at least they define it clearly for a period of time. And somehow that wasn't really something that I did instinctively. And so I never wound up pursuing, oh, I'm the artist.
Yeah.
And I suppose now with what my resume is and what my career history has been and the skill set that I've got, I could conceivably be creating work where that winds up being what it is. Here's a Russell Graham record, that kind of thing. That could happen. And with current perspective, I could probably figure out, here's what that should be. But even though as a little kid, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an Elton John. I never did that. To do that now, I would still have to figure out what that is for me.
Yeah. I feel that way too. Like when I was a kid, the Barry Manilows, those guys were like superheroes to me because of their identity. I was like, wow, I could never do that.
Yeah. And one of the things that was really interesting to me, my wife and I both worked on the show American Idol for a few years. And that was the last primary thing that I did before coming on full time with Nile and Chic. And one of the things we noticed was that even though it comes across probably to the general public as a singing competition, in terms of who makes it to the finish line, it's not a singing competition. It's an artistry competition. As kind of cliche and naive as that sounds, the performers who consistently made it to the last 2 or 3 shows weren't necessarily the ones with the best vocal instrument or the best control over that vocal instrument. There was one year where the final 2 really were also the best singers.
Yeah.
But that wasn't necessarily the most important factor. Consistently, the ones who made it to the finish line were the ones who had the strongest sense of who they were artistically and didn't let the voting or the TV producers or the record producers changed that. They knew who they were, they stuck to who they were, and that got them all the way to the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. I never thought of it that way. As you take someone like a Bo Bice, who wasn't the best singer, but he's consistently stayed who he was through the whole competition. He didn't win, but I get it now. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. I thought it was just the people voting.
Yeah, and I'm sure that demographics play a part, and sort of stereotypical roles play a part. But even if you think about all of our favorite artists, our favorite singers, they don't have to be the best singer. If you take somebody like a Placido Domingo, unparalleled in terms of instrument and vocal control, but he's not the only singer we love. If you take somebody like a Joe Cocker, he's got a unique sound. He's instantly identifiable, and when he would sing, you believed what he was saying. That's the critical bit. You believe that he believes what he's delivering.
Can you tell us a little bit about your first big gig that you got?
Oh, first big gig. I guess what you would call the first big gig was at the Apollo Theater in New York City. So I had been introduced, and I want to try not to make this too lengthy, but I need to backtrack a little bit. So my wife had been a contestant at the Apollo Theater. She was a live contestant at the Wednesday night amateur nights for, she was there a few times and did well. And so they pushed her to do the TV show Showtime at the Apollo. And so she sort of developed a history of knowing the house band there that was led by Ray Chu. So it was Ray Chu and the crew. And she also became friendly with the head carpenter there, a guy by the name of Joe Gray, who also, apart from being the head carpenter, was a fantastic performer himself. He's a great vocalist. He's a great entertainer. At one point, he was, for a period of time, one of the drummers for Cameo. So he's got an interesting history himself. But she said, you got to meet Joe Gray. So I met Joe Gray, and Joe Gray said, you got to meet Ray Chu. So I met Ray Chu. And for maybe a period of about 6 months, I would periodically call Ray's office and say, hey, just checking in. If I'm available, if anything pops up that you think I might be appropriate for. And at this point, there hadn't been any sort of an audition or an evaluation process or anything. I was just some musician that somebody told Ray was decent, calling his office.
Yeah.
And then leading into January of 2003, there was this series of unique circumstances where a licensing agreement wasn't renewed and a production company switched. And so a different production company was doing Showtime at the Apollo. And the production company that previously had been doing it decided to create their own show. And they tried to get some of the Apollo musicians to do that show. But for the most part, the Apollo house band was kind of standing in solidarity with the Apollo Theater. And the new production company wanted to bring in people that they were accustomed to doing TV shows with, and they were LA based. And so that was Ricky Minor and his group of fantastic musicians. I'm sure we've all seen, plenty of Ricky Minor television performances. And so it was this interesting and unusual dynamic of, for the most part, the Apollo house band was sort of just standing by, because Ricky wanted to bring his band, the Apollo wanted their band, and at the same time, this other new TV show is trying to grab some of the musicians. So the way this all played out was that at the Apollo, it was a hybrid. It was Ricky on bass. He brought in Gerald Hayward on drums, who at the time was doing a lot of work with Mary J. Blige, Ray Chu on keyboard, and almost at the very last minute, the other keyboard player from the Apollo agreed to do the other show and disappeared. And so Ricky scrambled and made arrangements for one of his other keyboardists, Dave DeLome, to come into town. And at the same time, Ray's office scrambled and went, well, let's try this Russell guy. And so by the time all of this became known to each other, Ricky said, well, I'm not going to cancel my guy. I don't want you to cancel your guy. We'll have 3 keyboard players. So we had this one season of Showtime at the Apollo, taped in January of 2003, where it was Ray Chu on keyboard and Dave DeLome on keyboard and me as keyboard 3, which meant that if it turned out I was really screwing up, they could just mute me. And and fortunately, they didn't need to, and it went well. And I continued doing the live Wednesday nights after that and several more seasons of the TV show. So it was sort of like just being dropped into this thing.
And that became like a regular gig for you?
Yeah, I worked with Ray at the Apollo through the end of 2010. I did American Idol with him 2011, 12, 13. And as part of that core group of musicians, we also did several years of BET Awards. We did a few years of BET Celebration of Gospel. We did various other awards. We did one season of the Emmy Awards. We did some other tribute things. So amongst all of us, we've got this ridiculous list of artists that we've played with. Most of them we've played with once. They wouldn't recognize us on the street, but our job was to try and make them feel for that moment as if they had their own band there.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. I'm going to take it back for a second. You've mentioned your wife several times. How did you guys meet? Did you guys meet through music? Did you meet?
Yeah, through music. We were sort of introduced. So he'll claim responsibility for this, even though he didn't directly introduce us. There's a vocalist in the New York area named Gordon Dukes who did a fair amount of work with the artist Shaggy, including some writing and production on the Hot Shot album. And so Gordon was one of the vocalists with a band that I did a lot of work with for several years, doing weddings, high-end corporate functions, various kinds of private party events, mostly in the New York area, sometimes for travel. And we had a standing gig. Well, I guess at the time, so at the time Tanya and I met, we didn't have the standing gig yet. That's a different part of the story. Okay. But we would periodically do essentially a paid showcase, like a very low paying gig, but it was an opportunity for clients to come see the band because you can't bring them to a private function. And we would do this at what was called the greatest bar on earth on the 107th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So it was part of the Windows of the World establishment. Mm-hmm. And so we would do this periodically, and Gordon thought maybe Tanya might be a good fit for picking up some of the gigs with this particular band and brought her down. So that was where we initially met. We were on a couple of gigs after that. And one of the more unique aspects of this is that by 2001, that band did have a regular standing gig at Greatest Bar on Earth. And so the second Tuesday of each month, we would go play there as sort of this paid showcase. And of course, the second Tuesday of the month in September of 2001 was September 11th. So we were scheduled to be there, on the 107th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center on 9/11. And we wake up that morning to various emails, starting with, hey guys, check in with me. We got to see what's going on tonight, to, hey guys, not sure if there's going to be a gig tonight, to, hey guys, turn on your televisions.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
How did that feel, being so, almost connected to that?
And
how does it feel talking about it?
It's an interesting connect and disconnect, because we were linked so tangentially. We were only there once a month. And we were there at a time when any of the people who we knew who worked there, they wouldn't have been at work at the time of the attack.
Yeah.
So anybody who we knew personally who happened to be there, it was because we knew them in some other capacity, and that was their workplace, whether it was something financial. And it's this odd sense of feeling connected to it, but not really feeling entitled to be that impacted by it, because really it didn't impact us personally very much at all compared to so many other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a, I'm kind of speechless. I didn't even know that.
I know it's hard to I'm sure I'm still figuring out how to gradually process it.
Yeah.
It never had, like, the fact that I've got this random tangential attachment to it has never really hit with any sort of force.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it ever will. It's sort of like gradually seeps in, I think.
Yeah. Because I'm like, how do I transition to the next question without being, like, it just kind of hit me for a second.
Well, yeah, and I can see how it would. And at the same time, it's sort of like, well, that it is what it is. And, of course, it's unbelievably tragic. And at the same time, kind of life goes on. We had to play an event in Tribeca, I think less than a week after that. And so you're driving past the fenced off disaster site, and you have to just get past it, do what you've got to do, get back out. Of course, some of the musical work, at various times, I have had connections to doing musical work for religious institutions. And so, of course, some of the musical work after that was funerals and memorial services at synagogues and churches. And I don't think we did any in a mosque, but we definitely had a couple of interfaith events hosted by churches or synagogues. But yeah, it's right. How do you get past that and move to what's next? And at the same time, you get past it and move to what's next. You have to.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare for a live show? Let's try to take it somewhere lighter.
Sure. So would this be, say, a typical live show in the current context, or would this be so I guess, well, let me give you two answers.
Okay.
So in terms of the show that we do now as Chic, we know the songs. We've already played the songs. We've played them many times. If it's something that we've recently added to the set, we've taken the time to rehearse it. So it's not like we need to learn the material. The preparation typically is not going to be, I need to learn this song. Yeah. It's going to be more along the lines of, it's a show day. What do we do to make sure we've had enough rest to be able to deliver whatever we need to deliver on stage? And for me personally, it'll usually be try not to be starving by the time you hit the stage, but also try not to eat too much too soon before the show.
Yeah.
Typically, I will boil water with sliced up ginger in it. That's one of the things on our hospitality rider, fresh ginger, so that we can slice it up, boil it in water, and make kind of an infusion. Usually add some honey to that. And a lot of times on the rider, like, we're not a hard partying band where you've got tons of liquor backstage, but usually there'll be something and you can put a splash of that in. And this is like, I hesitate to even say this because I don't want people to go, oh, I've got to drink before I go on stage, because that's not it at all. A tiny bit of alcohol added to this ginger infusion with honey does this thing where the ginger kind of opens things up. And to a certain extent, the alcohol opens things up. And at the same time, the honey soothes. Mm-hmm. But if you've got too much honey, you start to feel sort of gunky. Yeah. And if it's got more than just a tiny splash of alcohol in it, you start to feel dry. And so the whole thing makes it worse instead of better. But that's, for me personally, that's typically just to keep things vocally lubricated, but also not tight.
Yeah.
For me personally, I've gotten into the habit of doing a lot of very strange sounding vocal warm-ups that are only remotely related to what I would have learned in formal vocal training. It's not your typical scales and arpeggios and exercises. A little bit of it is, and a little bit of it is for me to find accuracy and have the conditioning of here's where the notes are, and when I need to sing on stage, that's going to have pitch accuracy. But for me personally, most of it, and this is directly related to having had really horrible allergies growing up and finally kind of getting past that, which I'll explain separately in a moment. But for me personally, the warm-ups largely have to do with finding where are the breaks across ranges in my voice, how are they cooperating or not cooperating that night, and how smoothly can I figure out how to switch across them. So I'll do like vocal sirens up and down. I imagine this is immensely irritating to the people around me. And I thought fairly unique until TikTok started showing me all kinds of videos of other people who are doing the same thing. And they've even got names for this stuff. They go, okay, well, now I'm going to show you the twang, like the twang. And they do this odd nasal vocal siren that's like the same thing that I'm accustomed to doing. And they're explaining why it's important, why it works. And this seems to be very prevalent amongst Broadway performers who have to switch between different tones, switch between different styles. And the only reason a lot of this is possible for me is from having finally done allergy shots where, growing up, even though I was doing proper vocal training, I couldn't really access what most people would call a mixed tone. I couldn't do a mixed belt. I couldn't do a mixed tenor tone or a quote light tenor tone. I had chest up to a certain note, and then it was full falsetto above that, and no combination and no transition. And when I finally did the allergy shots as an adult, where they inject you with little bits of what you're allergic to, and your body gradually builds up a tolerance, and they increase the concentration from week to week, etc. Suddenly, all this inflammation inside my head and my vocal cavity that I hadn't realized was inflammation for decades went away. And these things started to work. I went, oh, that's what they were trying to teach me 10 years ago. So in some ways, it's just fun for me to be able to sweep through that, and the fact that it's even actually possible.
Wow. Yeah. So it opened it all up for you.
Yeah. And part of the reason for me, so part of doing that as one of my main personal preps to go on stage is the fact that all of us in Chic sing. Everybody on the stage is able to carry a melody, latch onto a harmony. The horn players would even sing if they didn't have a horn in their mouth. And there are spots where I've got to jump to different kinds of vocal characters, different kinds of vocal ranges. At times I'm singing pretty low. At times I'm singing pretty high. And when I don't do at least a little bit of this warming up, I feel like I don't have the control that I want over being able to switch to those different characters while still singing in tune.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a personal selfishness kind of thing that I don't want to feel like I didn't nail it.
Yeah. Oh no. Especially with a band like Chic, when you're surrounded by so much talent.
Yeah.
You kind of, it's a battle every night.
It helps me keep up.
Yeah. Right. Speaking of Chic, man, how did you hook up with Nile, and how did that start?
That was part of that same situation that I described with the Apollo Theater.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2006, March of 2006, Katie Couric had a fundraiser event at the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan. And the theme was Hollywood meets Motown. And she had reached out to Nile to put together a band and put artists together. And so the lineup of this wound up being mostly actors and actresses, very few actual recording artists. So we did have Smokey Robinson, we did have Ashford and Simpson. They were a couple of the artists who could actually do their own material.
Yeah.
John Legend covered a Motown song. Other than that, it was a lot of TV and film people. Idina Menzel did a song. Sting did a song. Bacon Brothers did a song. Kevin Bacon and his brother.
Yeah.
Who else? Tina Fey and Jimmy Fallon did a song. Whoopi Goldberg did a Temptations song. And it was that kind of hybrid lineup. And leading into this, Nile was sort of looking at, well, what was the current configuration of Chic at that time? And it didn't happen to be something where he felt that there would be the time and the inclination for all of Chic to learn 50 songs in a week. But he knew that Ray Chu at the Apollo was accustomed to doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so we had some of the Chic vocal section, plus the core of the Apollo house band at the time, which included me on keyboard and guitar, and included Ralph Roll, our current drummer in Chic, on drums. And so that, as far as I know, that was definitely the first time I got to play with Nile. And as far as I know, it was also the first time Ralph got to play with Nile directly. And then a couple of months after that, in May, there was a Chic performance, I think it was in Paris, that one of the keyboard players couldn't make it to. They had a family obligation or a health issue or something. And so Nile's office called me to say, hey, can you sub on this gig? And I got to go to Nile's studio in Connecticut, where he and Rich Hilton together showed me the show. So learning the show, like my first introduction to learning the parts, I mean, sure, I got a hold of the recordings of everything, and I got a hold of the Chic Live at the Budokan recording, the video and recording, and I studied those. But really learning the parts correctly was sitting there with Rich and Nile, with them showing me, here's what the piano does here. Here's what the piano does here. Here's why the piano does this here. So that was really a treat of a way to learn the show. And not long after that, I believe Omar Hakim, who had been the steady drummer for years, became unavailable. And so there were 2 or 3 other drummers who cycled in before they called Ralph and said, hey, can you cover this gig? And once he went and did the show, they just didn't want anybody else.
Yeah, understandably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so were you already part of that when Ralph came in?
I was occasionally subbing.
Okay.
So from 2006 through the end of 2013, if one or the other keyboardist couldn't make it, I would go do a show. And that might have, some years that was 1 or 2 shows, and some years that was 10 shows, but it was on an occasional basis for the most part.
Okay, cool. Nile works with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and you guys are so busy. Like, what are the challenges that you face balancing, you know, everything, musician, producer, MD, family?
The biggest challenge of it all is just the degree to which doing this kind of a job requires being absent from home, and the extra workload that places on everybody who is still at home. And on one hand, it's trickier because my wife Tanya is also a performer, and so there are times when she's got to disappear for work travel, and if we've both got to disappear at the same time, then that becomes a question of, okay, well, who watches the kid? How does he get to and from school? What does that mean? And that was particularly tricky immediately after pandemic lockdown. It's a little, as he gets older and as the world becomes more normal again, that gets a little easier. In terms of the various roles and functions, I don't really find it challenging switching between MD or producer or engineer or musician or vocalist, because personally, the variety is something that keeps it all interesting for me. I know musicians, like I know a trumpet player who I'm pretty sure was part of the entire run of Cats on Broadway. And that does mean that by the time you've got the chair and you're established, you can sub out, I think, up to 50% of the shows. That's the Broadway rule. If you've got the chair, you can sub out up to half the shows unless it's awards season. But that's still a lot of doing pretty much the same thing up to 8 times a week. And I don't know to what degree I would enjoy that or find it limiting. I've never had to find out, because pretty much every situation I've been in professionally since starting at the Apollo has involved a lot of needing to adapt and be versatile. And for me personally, that just really keeps things interesting. And it also means that while I'm having fun with the performances and the sessions, I'm enjoying the work. And of course, I'm also grateful to be able to support myself doing that. But one of the biggest incentives of it also is that there are constant opportunities to learn. We can pretty much guarantee if we go into the studio with someone, somebody is going to do something that I haven't seen before, where I go, oh, that's cool. I need to remember that.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of touring with Nile and Chic?
I think probably the responsiveness of the audiences, the way that we can tangibly feel that sounds weird. It's not, you can't touch it, but it's as if there's something tangible about the energy exchange and the way that you can tell that you impacted their human experience in a positive way. We did something, I don't know if I did check out the episode that you did with Rich Hilton. I don't think he mentioned this phrase that I've heard him say a lot. The way he phrases it is that we dispense happy. And I can't come up with a better way to say it than that.
Right on. Yeah, he does. I've heard him say that, but I don't think he said it in our interview.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Getting to see unique and unusual places sometimes is really cool. Sometimes you just don't have the time or energy for that. Like, you know the drill.
Yeah.
You know that sometimes
yeah.
trying to get enough sleep to be able to do the job, and it doesn't matter what amazing city you're in, you're really just not going to see anything.
No, you're going to see room service.
Right. That's one of the best parts for me, definitely, is the energy exchange with the audience. Oh, another is that I've been working as a professional musician since I was in my early teens. And even in high school, it was rare for me to be able to spend as much leisure time with my friends, my group of friends, as the rest of them could. I was almost always working when they were hanging out. And that has just kind of been the norm for me in terms of lifestyle. I'm frequently working when other people are hanging out. But the fact that we go to all these different places gives me a chance to actually see people in person, whether it's from childhood, from high school, from college. I can see all these people who have gotten scattered across the country and even across the globe.
Yeah.
And get to catch up with them. Like in London, I had lunch with a guy who I sang with in a choir in college who I haven't seen in ages.
Yeah.
And it took both of us being in London randomly to be able to do that. But that's, otherwise I wouldn't have had the chance to do that.
Yeah, that is the best when you can see folks from your past or people that you grew up with all over. I love this. I really thought your answer was going to be like, meeting Bernie on this whole.
Well, that's a big deal too.
Oh man. Is there a particular performance, man, that stands out that you're like, that's it? That after that, it all ended. You could say I did that.
Oh man. It's on one hand, there are a few of those because they have some degree of historic impact. On the other hand, in terms of being able to get through life and continue doing this as a job, you have to sort of compartmentalize each gig as it's just a gig and there's going to be another one. And so you've got to each gig is your audition for the next gig, is another way of putting it. But even taking that into account, when we played Glastonbury in 2017, just that unimaginable sea of human beings is really memorable.
Yeah.
There's something
amazing.
distinctive about that. Yeah, it really is.
Inauguration.
Sorry?
Didn't you also do with the inauguration?
Yes. So we were part of the house band, and that was with Ray from the Apollo and from American Idol. We were part of the house band for, so each year there are several inaugural balls. There's more than one, and whoever has been elected president has to attend. They have to bring them around to 10 or 11 inaugural balls. And so the year that President Obama was inaugurated, they decided there was going to be one official one that was televised. And so we were the house band for that. So that of course had a lot of historical significance. It felt unique to be there. And by the same token, what led us to that was playing for the 2008 Democratic National Convention. And that, similarly felt historic for sure.
Yeah. In a world of viral moments, Russell, I remember it was about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, you had your own viral moment from your
I see where this is going.
your Tiny Desk sessions.
Yeah.
How did that feel to be viral? People who didn't even know, because anytime, like, Chic is such a well-known band, but there's still people like, who's Chic? And then I'm, when they would come to Durango's, I'd tell them, like, just come out. You know who they are.
Right.
Oh, I know them. So
right, you're gonna know the songs. Yeah.
I was seeing this video being posted by people I know, who are country music fans, but just the fact you went viral for doing the Soul Glo theme. How did that feel? Was that planned?
It was fun. Doing the theme was semi-planned. Of course, when it appears in the movie in Coming to America, the original vocalist is a guy named Chris Max, and what he did, like that stratospheric performance, we couldn't even recreate that exactly. We had to bring it down a whole step just to be able to do it at all. And we knew we were doing Tiny Desk, and we knew that there's a limited amount of time for a Tiny Desk performance. And we had already managed to stretch that a little bit. We had gotten a song list approved that we knew was going to be a little bit over the amount of time they would ordinarily allow. And it was maybe a day or two in advance that Nile's publicist, who also works in some instances as the band's publicist, and in fact had linked us up with NPR, she came to me and she said, "You guys have to do the Soul Glo commercial. You got to do the Soul Glo commercial. The hits are great, but the general public needs to know, they need to be reminded of these other things that Nile has done, like film stuff. You got to do the Soul Glo commercial." I said, "Okay, let me, we've already got the set list approved. We're already at the time limit. Well, I'll talk to Nile. Let me see if he thinks this is a good idea." So the next time I saw Nile was just several hours later at breakfast the next day. And he must have already had the same conversation, because he goes, "We got to do the Soul Glo commercial." And so I explained the same thing. We've got, we've got a time limit. We're already at that limit. We've already approved what we can do. I'm not sure it's a good idea for us to go to NPR and say we want to add something. And also, that's a really fantastic comedic moment. And people associate that with humor. So what if you forget we had this conversation and we just see if we can catch you by surprise? And he said, "Oh, okay, we could try that." And so I messaged the band. I said, "Here's what we got to do. We got to learn the Soul Glo commercial. And I know I can get that top note if we bring it down a whole step from the original, but maybe one of you all can do it better. Who wants to do it?" And a whole barrage of, "Not me." And so there we wound up sort of picking a moment to interrupt him. And in terms of it going viral, I knew it was unique and humorous, and I knew that we had pulled it off well, but I'm not a skilled enough self-marketer to go, "Okay, I'm going to try and make this viral." And even if I had, it would have come across as self-promotion. I don't think it would have gotten the organic traction that it did from people latching onto it and enjoying the little Easter egg hunt and the mystery of trying to figure out, what the heck is this? And who's this guy singing it? And why? And so it sort of got its own momentum. And then people apparently got a kick out of tracking down my profile and going, "Oh, that's the guy who did it."
Yeah. And it's like you said, everything you just told us, it doesn't have all that. It feels like Nile's just caught off guard with you going into it and then singing it.
Yeah, because we made sure not to let him know exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, you killed it.
with his approval in advance, but it worked.
Yeah. I know everyone that sent it to me or posted it, I would say, "I know that guy." Sure you do, Bernie. Sure you do.
What does success look like and mean to you now versus when you first started? Like in music, success.
Interesting question. Let me think about what did I think success meant when I started playing music professionally? I probably thought that it meant figuring out how to be an artist, figuring out how to write the art that would connect with people to where they would want you to deliver that in performances over and over and over and over. And I probably didn't think about much else beyond that. And the various things that have served me well work-wise, like I get a lot of mileage out of being useful. And a lot of that is being a technician or an artisan rather than an artist. And that's fine. I think my current definition of it would be having an awareness of both of those aspects, the art and the artistry, the emotional creation and the technical aspects of delivering the emotional creation, and being constantly aware of trying to balance them and looking for long term, what are the potential ways of generating revenue from that? So like, I already know I'm hireable as a keyboard player or a guitarist or sometimes a bassist or a vocalist. I already know I'm hireable as an engineer and an editor and a mixer. I know that I have a strong songwriting and production skill set. And so long term, I'm aware of the potential and the need to try and find ways of monetizing that. And I'm also aware that we're in a changing world and a changing market where that becomes increasingly difficult. So I think to a certain extent, I'd say success is finding ways to use your particular unique skill set in settings in which you enjoy using that particular unique skill set in a way that allows you to support yourself while also balancing the creative and emotional pursuits that are going to provide fulfillment outside of that and possibly become part of the future way of supporting yourself. That sounds awfully complicated.
No, it's a great answer, man.
Would you have any advice for like an upcoming musician? Something that you wish somebody had told you maybe a couple decades ago?
I'm not sure that there's anything I wish people would have told me, because I was really fortunate to have people tell me useful things along the way, and not necessarily all at once. It just gradual absorption of useful knowledge. But I think one of the things that maybe might not be stressed in formal music education settings would be that it's definitely not just about talent. Talent should be the prerequisite. Like, if we define talent as an innate ability or even just a predisposition to being able to become skilled at something, let's call that talent. And if we define skill as having nurtured that ability and done the training and or practice to get good at whatever that is, so the talent isn't enough, and the preparation also isn't enough, but they're both required. You've got to have the talent, you've got to do the prep, and then on top of that, it's important to figure out how to be just a good human interactor. because anybody who isn't enjoyable to be around, well, I shouldn't even say enjoyable, anybody who's unpleasant to be around isn't going to stay in the job very long.
Yeah.
Good hang.
Yeah.
We always hear about the hang.
Yeah. It's very important.
Are there any projects you're excited about? Anything upcoming?
Oh, anything up? So upcoming stuff that's not announced or released yet. Probably also shouldn't be public knowledge yet. There were a couple of things that we've worked on in the studio where I think it'll be fun for people to know about them once they're out. One of the more recent, well, I should say two of the more recent things that I'm excited about having had the privilege to be a part of are that studio wise, in terms of getting to record performances for interesting or exciting releases. So Nile played guitar for a song on Beyonce's first country album, and Richie Sambora played guitar on a song for Dolly Parton's first rock album. And I had the pleasure of recording those performances. So I'm an engineer on the first Beyonce country album and on the first Dolly Parton rock album, both in the same release year, which to me feels unique and historic. And we'll see how the general public reflects on that as time goes on.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I remember when Dolly's manager at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame told me that she was recording a rock album.
Mm-hmm.
So don't roll your eyes at me, Lisa.
You love to drop that.
I love to drop it.
I'm a Dolly.
Well, Russell, where can people find you online?
Mostly Facebook. So on Facebook, I'm Russell Graham as a profile, but generally, well, if the general public is looking, they would probably want the Facebook music page, which, oh man, I should know the address for this off the top of my head, and I don't remember because everything constantly changes. I don't remember if it's Russell Graham Music. I know for sure on Instagram, I'm RTG Music Man.
Mm-hmm.
And on TikTok, I'm also RTG Music Man. On Facebook, I'm myself, but for a music page, just my name, Russell Graham, wasn't available anymore by the time I set it up. So it's probably Russell Graham Music or something along those lines. But it's easy to tell if you've got the right one because it'll have all sorts of links to other Nile and Chic stuff.
Right on.
And then there is russellgraham.com, which has a little bit of info, but I mean, it's a very, very simple website. People are probably looking for the social media stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, as you know, our podcast, it's called Is Breakfast Included? And if we were having breakfast, what would you have?
If I'm having breakfast on the road, I'm probably going to try to get enough protein and not too many carbs, but also not too much fat. I'm probably going to look for an omelet with some vegetables and maybe a little bit of meat in it. And I avoid wheat gluten, so I'm not going to be looking for traditional toast or pancakes or French toast or regular cereals or anything like that. I might have some kind of rice-based or corn-based cereal. Definitely coffee. Love coffee. Anything else? Usually some kind of juice. I often find orange juice very sweet, so I'll look for grapefruit juice if it's available, or a green juice if there's one available. That's probably about it.
Yeah, somewhat healthy, pretty healthy,
reasonably healthy.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, Russell, man, we appreciate you taking time to do this. I know how busy you are, and it's been a pleasure, man. I've toured with you for several years, and recently I actually got a chance to work with you guys and see you work in a different and the fact that I see how the band and the crew work together as a team, like it's really very impressive and very refreshing to see that. So
yeah, well, I mean, just like you guys in Duran, we're fortunate to just have a really, really great crew.
Yeah,
and
we should
we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the fact that not only are they good at the job itself when everything is doing what it's supposed to, but they're also really good at figuring out how to fix whatever might not be doing what it's supposed to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, man, it's good talking to you.
You too.
And like I said, we appreciate your time.
Well, thanks so much. Hope to see you again soon.
You too, buddy. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
And that wraps up another episode. A huge thanks goes out to Russell Graham for taking the time to chat and share his incredible journey with us. It's been an inspiring conversation. You can find Russell online on Instagram at rtgmusicman or on his website at russellgraham.com. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might love it too. We've got more great guests lined up, so stay tuned. You can also go to isbreakfast.com to find all of our links. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also check out our store and grab an Is Breakfast Included t-shirt to represent. Until next time, may your mornings be bright and your breakfast included. Talk to you next week.